I stood at the boarding gate at Lax, passport in hand, looking at the departure screen that read, Tokyo boarding now. At 72 years old, I was about to board my first international flight alone. The words my daughter Rebecca had said to me 3 months earlier still echoed in my mind. You're just a burden, Mom. We'd all be better off if you just disappear. So I did exactly that. I sold my house, the one I'd raised her in. I sold my car, my furniture, everything. And I bought a one-way ticket to freedom. You probably think I'm crazy. An elderly woman traveling the world alone? But let me tell you something. The craziest thing I ever did was spend 47 years sacrificing everything for a family that saw me as nothing more than an inconvenience. The daughter I'd given up my dreams for, the grandchildren I'd raised while she built her career, the son-in-law who treated me like hired help. They all thought I was too old, too useless, too much of a burden to matter anymore. They were wrong. My name is Eleanor Hayes, and this is the story of how my daughter's cruelty set me free. It's about what happened when I stopped being the devoted mother, the doting grandmother, the woman who always put everyone else first, and started being myself. What I discovered on the other side of that departure gate changed everything. Not just for me but for my entire family. Because when you tell someone they're a burden and they should disappear, you'd better be prepared for what happens when they actually do. Let me take you back to where this really began. Not 3 months ago in Rebecca's pristine living room, but 47 years earlier, when I was a 25-year-old woman with dreams bigger than the small town I grew up in. I'd been accepted to the University of California, Berkeley's graduate program in architecture. Me, Eleanor Hayes, a girl from Bakersfield whose parents had never gone to college. I'd worked 3 jobs to save enough money for the first semester. I'd aced the entrance exams. I had my whole life planned out. I was going to design buildings, create spaces that would inspire people, leave my mark on the world. Then I met Thomas Hayes at my cousin's wedding. He was handsome, charming, 10 years older than me. And he swept me off my feet in that way that only happens when you're young and haven't learned to protect your heart yet. We dated for 6 months. He proposed on my birthday. I said yes, and in that moment I didn't realize I was also saying goodbye to Berkeley, to architecture, to the life I'd planned. Thomas didn't believe wives should work outside the home. He wanted a traditional marriage, a traditional family. And I loved him, so I convinced myself that his dream could be my dream too. I sent the rejection letter to Berkeley. I never touched a drafting table again. Rebecca was born 11 months after our wedding. She was beautiful, perfect. And I threw myself into motherhood with the same passion I'd once reserved for my architectural sketches. If I couldn't design buildings, I'd design the perfect childhood for my daughter. I'd build her future instead of buildings. Thomas worked long hours at his accounting firm. I handled everything else. The house, the meals, the doctor's appointments, the parent-teacher conferences, the birthday parties, the carpools. When Rebecca wanted to take violin lessons, I drove her 40 minutes each way 3 times a week for 5 years. When she decided she wanted to be a cheerleader, I sewed her uniforms and organized fundraisers. When she set her sights on Stanford University, I hired tutors we couldn't quite afford and stayed up until midnight helping her with college applications. She got into Stanford. Full scholarship. I was so proud I cried for 3 days. Thomas died of a heart attack when Rebecca was a junior in college. He was only 56. I was devastated, but I couldn't fall apart because Rebecca needed me. She was studying business, stressed about maintaining her scholarship, worried about her future. So I sold our house, moved into a small apartment, and used the money to make sure she could focus on her studies without financial stress. You don't have to do that, Mom, she'd said when I told her. I want to, I replied. Your success is my success. I believed that. I really did. Rebecca graduated summa cum laude. She got a job at a prestigious consulting firm in San Francisco. Within 2 years, she'd met and married Derek Thornton, a venture capitalist whose family had money going back generations. They bought a house in Pacific Heights that cost more than I'd earn in 10 lifetimes. I was happy for her. She'd achieved everything I'd hoped for her. She'd gotten the education, the career, the life I'd sacrificed my dreams to give her. Then she got pregnant with twins. Mom, I need your help, she said, calling me at 11 o'clock one night during her 7th month. I can't do this alone. Derek travels constantly, and I'm not giving up my career. Could you move in with us? Just until the babies are older. Just until the babies were older. That was 13 years ago. Madison and Mason are wonderful kids. I love them more than I can express. But I didn't just help with the twins. I raised them. I was the one who woke up for midnight feedings while Rebecca slept. I was the one who changed diapers, dealt with teething, handled the terrible twos and the trying threes. I potty trained them, taught them to read, helped them with homework, drove them to soccer and piano and art class. Rebecca pursued her career. She made partner at her firm. Derek's company went public. They bought a bigger house, then a vacation home in Lake Tahoe. They traveled to Paris, Tokyo, Sydney, Dubai. They posted photos on social media of candlelit dinners and sunset beach walks, living their best life. And I stayed home with Madison and Mason, being grandma, being the help, being the one who made their glamorous life possible. I didn't mind. At least I told myself I didn't mind. The children needed stability. Rebecca needed to focus on her career. This was temporary, just until the children were older. But children don't stop needing care when they get older. The needs just change. Madison developed anxiety in middle school and needed someone to talk to every night before bed. Mason struggled with math and needed hours of tutoring. They needed rides to friends' houses, help preparing for tests, someone to attend their school events when Rebecca and Derek were traveling or working late, which was almost always. Make sure to follow along for more stories of transformation and finding your voice. I kept waiting for Rebecca to say thank you, to acknowledge what I'd given up, what I did for her family every single day. But thank you never came. Instead, what came was criticism. Mom, you let Madison wear that to school? It's completely inappropriate. Mom, Mason's math grades are slipping. Aren't you helping him? Mom, the house is a mess. What do you do all day? What did I do all day? I woke up at 6 to make breakfast. I packed lunches. I did laundry, cleaned bathrooms, vacuumed, dusted, grocery shopped, meal prepped, cooked dinner, loaded the dishwasher, helped with homework, mediated sibling arguments, and fell into bed at 11 o'clock exhausted. But the house was a mess. Sure. I started to feel invisible. Not just to Rebecca but to Derek too. He barely acknowledged my presence. I'd say good morning and he'd scroll through his phone. I'd ask about his day, and he'd grunt a one-word response. At family dinners, he and Rebecca would discuss their work, their friends, their plans, as if I wasn't even sitting at the table. When I tried to join conversations, Rebecca would change the subject or check her phone. When I offered opinions, Derek would dismiss them. When I suggested family activities, they were too busy. I was there to serve a function, not to be a person. The twins started to pick up on it. Madison, who'd once begged me to read her stories every night, started saying she was too old for grandma time. Mason stopped telling me about his day. They were teenagers now, more interested in their phones and friends than in me. I understood. That's normal for teenagers. But it hurt in ways I hadn't anticipated. I'd given up everything to raise these children, and now they were growing away from me just like Rebecca had. Last Christmas, Rebecca's younger brother Michael visited from Portland. I hadn't seen him in 2 years. He'd moved away after college and built a life that didn't involve family obligations. We'd never been particularly close, largely because I'd been so focused on Rebecca. He took one look at me and said, "Ellie, you look exhausted. Are you okay?" It was the first time in years someone had asked me that question. I started to cry right there in Rebecca's kitchen, and I couldn't stop. Michael sat with me for 2 hours while I told him everything. How invisible I felt. How unappreciated. How I'd given up my entire life and had nothing to show for it except the knowledge that I'd made everyone else's dreams possible while abandoning my own. "You need to talk to Rebecca," he said. "She needs to know how you feel." So I tried. I waited for a moment when Rebecca seemed relaxed. On a Saturday morning when Derek had taken the twins to their activities, I made her favorite coffee, sat down across from her at the kitchen table and said, "Rebecca, honey, I need to talk to you about something." She didn't look up from her laptop. "Can it wait? I'm in the middle of something. It's important." She sighed, the kind of sigh that made it clear I was interrupting something far more significant than whatever I had to say. But she closed the laptop. "Okay. What?" I'd rehearsed this conversation 100 times, but sitting there facing my daughter's impatient expression, all my careful words evaporated. Instead, what came out was, "I'm feeling really unappreciated." I've been living here for 13 years, helping with the children, managing the household, and I feel like I'm just invisible to you all. I need some acknowledgement, some gratitude, some sense that what I do matters." Rebecca stared at me for a long moment. Then she said, "Are you seriously asking me to thank you for babysitting?" Babysitting. The word hit me like a slap. "Rebecca, I've raised your children. I've sacrificed everything." "Sacrifice what exactly?" Rebecca's voice was cold. "You live in a beautiful house rent-free. You have no expenses. You're fed, sheltered, comfortable. What have you sacrificed?" "My life." The words burst out of me. "I gave up my education for you. I gave up my career dreams. I sold the house your father and I built together so you could finish college without stress. I moved here to help with the twins, and I've spent 13 years doing nothing but serving this family. I haven't taken a vacation, pursued a hobby, made a friend, or done a single thing for myself in over a decade. All I'm asking for is some basic appreciation for that." Rebecca's face hardened. "No one forced you to do any of those things, Mom. Those were your choices. You chose to marry Dad instead of going to college. You chose to sell your house. You chose to move in here. If you're unhappy with those choices, that's not my problem." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "Rebecca, I made those choices for you, to give you the best possible life. And I've given you a comfortable place to live in your old age." Rebecca interrupted. "I'd say we're even." "Even?" I was shaking now. "You think providing me room and board is equivalent to me raising your children? You're not raising my children, Mom. You're helping. And honestly, lately you've been helping less and complaining more." Rebecca opened her laptop again. "I have a lot of work to do. Was there anything else?" I should have let it go. I should have walked away. But 47 years of swallowing my feelings, of putting everyone else first, of being grateful for scraps of attention suddenly came boiling up and out of me. "Yes, there's something else," I said, my voice shaking. "I want to matter. I want to be more than just the help. I want my own life back." Rebecca looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not anger, not frustration, but something worse. Contempt. "Mom, you're 72 years old. What life do you think you're going to have? You're past the age where you get to have adventures and dreams. This is your life now. And frankly, the constant negativity is exhausting for all of us." "I'm not being negative, I'm being honest." "You want honesty?" Rebecca stood up. "Fine. You're right that you've sacrificed a lot over the years. But you made those choices because you didn't have anything else. You weren't smart enough for Berkeley. You married Dad because you needed security. You moved in here because you had nowhere else to go. You've spent your entire life riding on other people's coats because you were never capable of making it on your own." Each word was a knife. I stood there, frozen, as my daughter systematically destroyed me. "And now you're old and you're lonely and you're realizing that you don't have a life of your own. And instead of taking responsibility for that, you're blaming me. Well, I'm sorry, but I can't fix your life for you. I have my own career, my own family, my own problems. I don't have the bandwidth to manage your emotional neediness on top of everything else." "Rebecca, I'm not asking you to fix my life." "Then what are you asking for?" Rebecca's voice was rising. "Because from where I'm standing, all you do is complain and make everyone feel guilty. The kids are scared to talk to you because you're always sighing and looking sad. Derek thinks you're passive-aggressive. And I'm tired, Mom. I'm so tired of feeling like I'm failing you when I've given you everything." "You haven't given me everything," I whispered. "You've given me nothing. A room in your house isn't everything. Acknowledgement, respect, love. Those things matter more than a roof over my head." "Oh, for God's sake." Rebecca grabbed her laptop. "I can't do this right now. I have a presentation on Monday that I need to finish." She started to walk out of the kitchen, and something in me snapped. "Don't you walk away from me," I said, my voice stronger than I'd heard it in years. "We're not done talking." Rebecca turned around slowly. "Actually, we are. Because I'm done listening to you play the victim. You made your choices, Mom. You don't get to blame me for how your life turned out." "I'm not blaming you, I'm asking you to see me." "I see you just fine," Rebecca said. "I see a bitter old woman who's angry that her life didn't turn out the way she wanted, and who's determined to make everyone around her feel guilty about it. Honestly, Mom, you're just a burden. We'd all be better off if you just disappear. The kitchen went silent. Rebecca's eyes widened slightly, as if she hadn't quite meant to say that out loud, but she didn't take it back. A burden, I repeated softly. I didn't mean, Rebecca started, but I held up my hand. No, you meant it. And you know what? You're absolutely right. I walked out of the kitchen, went to my room and closed the door. I sat on the edge of my bed, Rebecca's words echoing in my head. You're just a burden. We'd all be better off if you just disappear. I'd spent 47 years being what everyone else needed me to be. The dutiful daughter, the supportive wife, the devoted mother, the helpful grandmother. I'd sublimated every dream, every desire, every part of myself to make other people happy. And in the end, I was nothing but a burden. I looked around my room. It was nice enough, decorated in the soft blues and grays that Rebecca had chosen. None of my own things, really. A few photos of the kids, some books, my clothes. Nothing that mattered. Nothing that was really mine. For the first time in my life, I had a moment of absolute clarity. I didn't have to live like this. I didn't have to accept being treated as an inconvenience in my own daughter's home. I didn't have to stay where I wasn't wanted, where I was seen as a burden rather than a person. Rebecca had told me to disappear. So I would. But not in the way she expected. I opened my laptop, the one I'd bought last year to help Mason with his school projects, and I started researching. Retirement accounts. Social Security benefits. Property values. My small apartment that I'd sold to help Rebecca through college? That money had been invested in a modest retirement fund that I'd never touched. With compound interest over 23 years, it had grown substantially. My Social Security benefits, which I'd been collecting since I turned 65, had been automatically deposited into a savings account. I'd never needed to use them because I had no expenses living with Rebecca. I started doing calculations. 7 years of Social Security benefits never touched. My retirement fund. Some savings bonds my mother had left me that I'd forgotten about. I wasn't rich, but I had enough. Enough to leave. Enough to start over. Enough to finally, at 72 years old, have the life I'd always dreamed of. Over the next week, I made plans. Real plans, not the vague someday dreams I'd had for decades. I contacted a financial advisor, a cheerful woman named Patricia who didn't bat an eye when I told her I was planning to travel the world. Good for you, she said. You're in better financial shape than you think. With careful budgeting, you could easily travel for 2 to 3 years before needing to settle somewhere. 2 to 3 years. I'd been thinking months, maybe a year at most. But 2 to 3 years? That was enough time to see the world. Enough time to figure out who Eleanor Hayes actually was when she wasn't being what everyone else needed. I researched travel blogs written by senior citizens. There were dozens of them, hundreds even. People in their 70s and 80s traveling solo, joining group tours, volunteering abroad, teaching English in foreign countries. People who decided that age was just a number, and that life didn't stop at retirement. I created a bucket list. Japan during cherry blossom season. The Christmas markets in Germany. The northern lights in Iceland. The temples of Thailand. The beaches of Greece. The ruins of Machu Picchu. All the places I'd seen in magazines and on television. All the places I dreamed about but never imagined I'd actually see. Rebecca didn't apologize for calling me a burden. She avoided me actually, which made it easier to make my plans without questions. Derek didn't notice anything different, but then Derek never noticed me at all. Madison and Mason were busy with school and friends and their own teenage lives. Nobody saw me packing up my few personal belongings little by little, donating what I didn't need to charity. Nobody noticed when I took my important documents to a safety deposit box at a bank across town. Nobody asked why I was suddenly taking long walks every afternoon, walks that just happened to take me past real estate offices and travel agencies. I contacted Michael in Portland. I'm leaving, I told him. I wanted you to know. Leaving the house? He asked. Leaving everything, I said. I'm going to travel. See the world. Figure out who I am when I'm not being everybody's support system. There was a long pause. Then Michael said, It's about damn time, Ellie. Good for you. You think I'm crazy. I think you're brave, he said. I think you should have done this 30 years ago. Do you need anything? Money? Help planning? No, I said. I've got it handled. But thank you for asking. Where will you go first? Japan, I said. I've always wanted to see the cherry blossoms. Send me photos, Michael said. And Ellie? Don't tell Rebecca until you're already gone. She'll try to talk you out of it or make you feel guilty. He was right. I knew he was right. 2 weeks after that devastating conversation in the kitchen, I had everything arranged. I'd booked a flight to Tokyo. I'd arranged travel insurance. I'd signed up for a seniors travel group that would help me navigate Japan for the first 2 weeks, after which I planned to explore on my own. I'd researched hostels and budget hotels, figured out train passes and local customs. I felt more alive than I had in decades. The night before my flight, I made my famous pot roast for dinner, the one Rebecca had loved as a child. I set the table nicely, used the good dishes. Rebecca, Derek, Madison, and Mason all came to dinner, which was rare these days. "This is nice, Mom," Rebecca said, and she almost sounded genuine. "What's the occasion?" "No occasion," I said. "I just wanted to have a nice family dinner." We ate and talked, or rather they talked and I listened. Madison was trying out for the lead in the school musical. Mason had made the varsity soccer team. Derek's company was acquiring another startup. Rebecca was up for a major promotion. Everyone was doing so well, living such full, exciting lives. I'd helped build those lives. I'd sacrificed to make them possible. And now I was going to build a life of my own. After dinner, after the dishes were done, I went to my room and pulled out my suitcase. One medium-sized suitcase, that was all I was taking. Everything else I'd already donated or thrown away. Everything that mattered fit in one bag. I thought about leaving a note, but what was there to say? Rebecca had made her feelings clear. I was a burden. They'd be better off if I disappeared. So I'd give them exactly what they wanted. I was up at 4 in the morning. My Uber was scheduled for 5 to get me to LAX for my 8 o'clock flight. I got dressed in comfortable travel clothes, grabbed my suitcase and carry-on, and took one last look at the room I'd lived in for 13 years. I didn't feel sad. I felt free. I left my house key on the kitchen counter with a simple note. "You said I was a burden and should disappear. I'm granting your wish. Don't try to contact me. I'll reach out when and if I'm ready. Love, Mom." Then I walked out the front door of Rebecca's house for the last time. The Uber driver, a kind man named Ahmed, made small talk about where I was headed. When I told him Tokyo, his face lit up. "First time?" he asked. "First time traveling alone," I said. "First time leaving the country, actually." "You're going to love it," he said. "My wife and I went last year. Best trip of our lives." I smiled, looking out the window as we drove through the still dark streets of San Francisco toward the airport. The city lights twinkled like stars, and I felt like I was driving toward my own personal sunrise. At the airport, I checked my bag, went through security and found my gate. I bought an overpriced coffee and a croissant and sat down to wait for boarding. My phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca. "Where are you? Your room is empty." I didn't respond. Another buzz. "Mom, this isn't funny. Where did you go?" I turned off my phone. They called for boarding. Zone 1 first class. I'd splurged, deciding that if I was going to fly for 13 hours, I might as well be comfortable. I handed my boarding pass to the attendant and walked down the jetway. I'd made it onto the plane, found my seat, and was just settling in when I turned my phone back on briefly to switch it to airplane mode. Messages flooded in. "Rebecca. Mom, please answer me. I'm worried. Derek. Eleanor, Rebecca is very upset. Where are you? Madison. Grandma, please come home. Michael. Did you do it? Are you on your way? Proud of you, sis." I smiled at Michael's message and texted back quickly. "Wheels up in 20 minutes. Talk soon." Then I turned the phone off completely and tucked it into my bag. A flight attendant approached. "Can I get you something to drink before takeoff, Miss Hayes?" "Champagne," I said. "Please." She returned with a glass of champagne in a real glass, not plastic. I took a sip and looked out the window at the sun starting to rise over the San Francisco Bay. At 72 years old, my life was finally beginning. The flight to Tokyo was 13 hours of pure possibility. I watched movies I'd never had time to see. I read a novel just for pleasure. I talked to the woman sitting next to me, a retired teacher named Joan who was meeting her daughter in Tokyo for a girls' trip. "Just the two of you?" I asked. Just us, Joan said with a smile. We do it every year. Different city each time. Last year was Barcelona. The year before, Prague. That sounds wonderful, I said, trying to imagine Rebecca and me taking a trip together just for fun. I couldn't picture it. Do you have children? Joan asked. A daughter and a son, I said. And 2 grandchildren. Are they in Tokyo? No, I said. They're in San Francisco. They don't know I'm on this flight. Joan raised an eyebrow, and I found myself telling her everything. About Rebecca's words, about feeling invisible, about deciding to disappear, about how, for the first time in my life, I was doing something purely for myself. Joan listened without judgment. When I finished, she said, "Good for you. I spent 20 years being a doormat for my ex-husband before I finally left. Best decision I ever made. You've got to live for yourself, Eleanor. Nobody else is going to do it for you." We exchanged email addresses before landing, promising to keep in touch. Felt good making a friend. When was the last time I'd made an actual friend? Tokyo was overwhelming in the best possible way. The lights, the crowds, the energy. Everything was so different from anything I'd experienced. My travel group consisted of 8 other seniors from around the world, led by a guide named Kenji who spoke perfect English and had infinite patience for our questions. We visited temples and shrines. We learned to navigate the subway system. We ate sushi for breakfast at the Tsukiji fish market, and ramen at tiny restaurants where you ordered from vending machines. We walked through parks filled with cherry trees just beginning to bloom, their delicate pink flowers like something from a painting. Every morning I woke up excited. Every day brought something new. Every night I fell into bed exhausted and happy. I didn't turn my phone on for a week. When I finally did, I had 67 messages. Most were from Rebecca, progressing from worry to anger to guilt-tripping. "Mom, where are you? This is completely irresponsible. Do you have any idea how worried we are? You can't just abandon your family like this. At least let me know you're alive." There were messages from Derek, stiff and formal, asking me to contact them. Messages from Madison and Mason that broke my heart a little. "Grandma, please come home, I miss you." But didn't make me waver. And messages from Michael. "Don't you dare come back. Live your life." I sent one group text to Rebecca, Derek, and the twins. "I'm safe. I'm happy. I'm traveling. I'll be in touch when I'm ready. Don't worry about me." Rebecca called immediately. I didn't answer. She texted, "Mom, this is ridiculous. You can't just run away because we had one argument." I replied, "You said I was a burden and you'd be better off if I disappeared. I'm giving you what you wanted. Enjoy your burden-free life." I turned the phone off again. After 2 weeks with the tour group, I struck out on my own. I took the bullet train to Kyoto and spent a week exploring ancient temples and traditional gardens. I learned to love the ritual of tea ceremonies, the precision and mindfulness of each movement. I traveled to Osaka and ate my way through street food markets. I visited Hiroshima and stood in the Peace Memorial Park, crying for all the loss and all the resilience human beings are capable of. I met other travelers, mostly younger than me but welcoming and kind. A pair of Australian backpackers in their 30s adopted me for a few days, showing me how to find the best budget accommodations and local experiences. A retired couple from Germany shared their tricks for traveling cheaply but comfortably. Everyone I met asked the same question. "What made you decide to travel now?" And I always gave the same answer. I decided it was time to start living for myself. Nobody thought that was strange. Nobody told me I was too old or being selfish or abandoning my responsibilities. They congratulated me. They shared their own stories of breaking free from lives that didn't fit anymore. I started a blog, mostly just for myself, documenting my travels. I wrote about the places I saw, the food I ate, the people I met. I wrote about rediscovering myself at 72, about learning that it's never too late to change your life. To my surprise, people started following it. Other seniors who dreamed of traveling but thought they were too old. People who'd spent their lives serving others and were ready to serve themselves. Within a month, I had 1,000 followers. Within 2 months, 5,000. People commented on my posts, sharing their own stories, asking for advice, thanking me for inspiring them. A woman from Ohio wrote, "I'm 68 and I've been taking care of my disabled husband for 15 years. Reading your blog reminds me that there's still life after duty. Thank you. A man from Texas. I retired last year and I've been sitting in my recliner watching TV ever since. Your posts make me want to get up and do something. Thank you for that kick in the pants. I was making a difference, inspiring people just by living my own life. It was intoxicating. After 6 weeks in Japan, I flew to Thailand. I spent a month island hopping, learning to scuba dive at 72 years old, volunteering at an elephant sanctuary, taking cooking classes where I learned to make curries and pad thai from scratch. I met a group of women traveling together, all in their 60s and 70s, all solo travelers who'd connected online and decided to meet up. We spent 2 weeks exploring together, laughing until our sides hurt, sharing stories late into the night. One of them, a woman named Patricia from London, said, "You know what I love about traveling at our age? We don't care what anyone thinks anymore. We're not trying to impress anyone or find a husband or make our parents proud. We're just being ourselves." It was true. I'd spent my entire life worrying about what other people thought, what other people needed, whether I was good enough, pretty enough, useful enough. Here, on the other side of the world, none of that mattered. I was just Eleanor, and Eleanor was enough. I turn my phone on once a week now just to check in and post updates to my blog. Rebecca still texted regularly, but the messages had changed tone. At first, "Mom, this is childish. Come home." Then, "We need to talk about this. You can't just run away from your problems." Then, "The kids miss you. Don't you care about them?" And finally, about 3 months into my travels, "I don't understand why you're doing this. Did I really hurt you that badly?" That message almost broke me. Almost made me call her, explain everything, maybe even come home. But then I remembered her face when she called me a burden. I remembered the contempt in her voice when she said I'd never been smart enough for Berkeley, never been capable of making it on my own. I wasn't running away from problems. I was running toward myself. From Thailand, I went to Vietnam. I rode a motorbike through Hanoi traffic with a local guide, ate pho for breakfast every morning, and took a 3-day cruise through Ha Long Bay that was like sailing through a fantasy world of limestone cliffs and emerald water. I went to Cambodia and cried at the Angkor Wat temples, overwhelmed by their beauty and history. I went to India and found myself in the chaos of Delhi, the spirituality of Varanasi, the romance of Rajasthan. In Jaipur, I met a woman named Anita who ran a small guest house. She was about my age, a widow who'd turned her family home into a place for travelers after her children had moved away. They wanted me to sell this house and move in with them. She told me over chai on her rooftop terrace. "But this is my home, my memories, my independence." I told them thank you, but no. I'll make my own way. Weren't they angry? I asked. "Very angry," Anita laughed. They thought I was being stubborn and difficult. But eventually they realized I was serious. Now they visit me here and they're proud of what I've built. Sometimes you have to disappoint people to find yourself. Sometimes you have to disappoint people to find yourself. I wrote that in my journal that night, underlined it 3 times. After 4 months of traveling through Asia, I flew to Europe. I spent spring in Greece, swimming in impossibly blue water, eating fresh fish and Greek salads, learning phrases in a language that sounded like music. I went to Italy and fell in love with everything: the art, the architecture, the food, the way people seem to savor life instead of rushing through it. In Florence, I took an art history class designed for tourists and stood in front of Michelangelo's David, crying because I once dreamed of creating beauty like this. An older gentleman standing next to me, noticing my tears, said, "Beautiful, isn't it? I wanted to be an architect once," I told him. I gave it up before I even started. "Why?" he asked simply. "Because everyone else needed me to be something different." He nodded thoughtfully. "My father wanted me to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a musician. I became a lawyer to please him, and I was miserable for 30 years. Then he died, and I realized I'd wasted my life trying to earn approval I was never going to get. So I retired, picked up my guitar, and now I play in a jazz club 3 nights a week. I'm 68 years old, and I'm happier than I've ever been." "Is it too late for me?" I asked. "To study architecture, I mean? Is your brain still working?" He asked with a smile. "I think so." "Then it's not too late." That conversation sparked something in me. I started sketching again, something I hadn't done in 47 years. Just simple drawings at first, the buildings I saw, the landscapes, the city squares. But it felt right, like finding a part of myself I'd lost. In Rome, I bought a proper sketchbook and good pencils. I sat in the Piazza Navona for hours, drawing the fountains, the church, the way the light hit the buildings at different times of day. An art student from the nearby university sat down next to me and looked at my work. "These are really good," she said. "Have you studied architecture?" "No," I said. "But I wanted to once upon a time." "You should pursue it," she said. "It's never too late to learn." Never too late. I kept hearing that phrase from strangers all around the world. Meanwhile, my daughter had told me I was too old to have dreams. I spent summer in France, drinking wine in Paris cafes, visiting the Palace of Versailles, wandering through lavender fields in Provence. I went to the Christmas markets in Germany in December, drinking Glühwein and eating Lebkuchen and feeling like I'd stepped into a fairy tale. I learned to travel light, to adapt to different cultures, to ask for help when I needed it, and to offer it when I could. I learned that the world was full of kind people who didn't see me as a burden, but as a fellow human being worthy of respect and attention. My blog was growing steadily. I had 20,000 followers now, and I'd started receiving emails from readers asking for specific advice. How to travel on a budget. How to stay safe as a solo senior woman. How to deal with family members who didn't support their decision to travel. That last question came up a lot. I shared my story, not all the details but enough. I wrote about feeling invisible in my own family, about being called a burden, about deciding to choose myself for once. The responses were overwhelming. I thought I was the only one who felt this way. Thank you for giving me permission to put myself first. My daughter is furious that I'm planning a solo trip, but reading your blog gives me strength. I was helping people just by being honest about my own experience. It was more meaningful than anything I'd done in years. One evening in Barcelona, sitting on the beach watching the sunset, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but it had a San Francisco area code. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello, Mom." It was Madison and she was crying. My heart clenched. "Madison, honey, what's wrong? Are you okay?" "I'm okay," she sobbed. "But I miss you so much, Grandma. Please come home." I closed my eyes, fighting my own tears. "Sweetheart, I can't. Not yet." "Why not? Don't you love us anymore?" "I love you more than anything," I said. "But I need to do this for me. Can you understand that?" "No," Madison said honestly. "I don't understand why you left. Mom won't tell me what happened. She just says you needed a break, but it's been 8 months, Grandma. When are you coming back?" 8 months. I'd been traveling for 8 months, and it felt like both a lifetime and no time at all. "I don't know when I'm coming back," I said gently. "Maybe not for a long time. Maybe never to live there. But I still love you, Madison. That hasn't changed." "Everything has changed," Madison said. "Mom is different. She's sad all the time, and she and Dad are fighting a lot. Mason thinks it's because you left, but I don't know. Everything just feels wrong without you here." Part of me wanted to feel guilty. Part of me wanted to get on the next flight home and fix everything like I always had. But a stronger part of me knew that fixing everyone else's problems was exactly what had made me invisible in the first place. "Madison, I need you to listen to me," I said. "What happened between your mom and me, that's between us. It's not your fault, and it's not your responsibility to fix it. You keep being the amazing person you are. Focus on your own life, your own happiness." "Okay. But what about you?" Madison asked. "Are you happy?" I looked out at the Mediterranean, golden in the setting sun. I thought about the 8 months I'd spent discovering the world and rediscovering myself. The sketches filling my notebooks. The friends I'd made. The person I was becoming. "Yes," I said. "I'm happier than I've been in a very long time." Madison was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "I'm glad you're happy, Grandma. I just wish you could be happy here with us." "Maybe someday," I said. "But not yet. I love you, sweetheart." After I hung up, I cried for an hour. But I didn't change my plans. From Spain, I went to Portugal, then to Morocco. I haggled in the souks of Marrakesh, rode a camel in the Sahara Desert, and drank mint tea with Berber families who welcomed me into their homes. I spent Christmas in Iceland, finally seeing the northern lights dance across the sky in waves of green and purple. I cried again, overwhelmed by the beauty, by the fact that I was here, that I'd made this happen for myself. On New Year's Eve, I was in Reykjavik at a small party organized by my hostel. Most of the other guests were in their 20s and 30s, but they included me in their celebrations without hesitation. At midnight, a young woman from Australia gave me a hug and said, "What's your resolution for the new year?" "To keep being brave," I said. "You're my hero," she said. "I hope I'm as cool as you when I'm your age." I laughed. "You'll be cooler. You're already braver. You're doing this in your 20s. It took me until my 70s to figure it out." A year into my travels, my blog had 50,000 followers. A publisher reached out and asked if I'd be interested in writing a book about my journey. Me, a published author at 73. The girl from Bakersfield who never went to college. I said yes. Writing the book forced me to confront everything. Not just my travels, but the decades of sacrifice that had led to them. I wrote about marrying Thomas instead of going to Berkeley. About raising Rebecca alone after he died. About moving in with Rebecca and slowly becoming invisible. And I wrote about that conversation in the kitchen, the one where my daughter called me a burden. It was painful putting it all on paper. But it was also liberating. Every word I wrote was another step toward understanding myself, toward forgiving myself for all the years I'd spent being less than I could have been. I was in New Zealand when I got an email from Rebecca. Not a text, an actual email. Long and detailed. Subject line: "We need to talk." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. "Mom, I've been following your blog. I didn't know you were writing it until Michael sent me the link a few months ago. I've read every post, some of them multiple times. I need you to know that I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I said to you that day in the kitchen. I'm sorry for calling you a burden. I'm sorry for not seeing how much you sacrifice for me, for the kids, for our family. I've spent this past year in therapy trying to understand why I treated you the way I did. My therapist says I was projecting my own feelings of inadequacy onto you. That I felt guilty for relying on you so much and dealt with that guilt by minimizing your contributions. I don't know if that's true or if it's just an excuse. All I know is that I was wrong. You weren't a burden. You were the foundation that allowed me to build my career and my life. And instead of being grateful, I took you for granted. I understand if you never want to come back. I understand if you can't forgive me. But I needed you to know that I see now what I couldn't see then. You're an incredible woman who deserved so much better than what I gave you. The kids miss you terribly. Derek says he misses you too, though I suspect he mostly misses how smoothly the household ran when you were managing everything. I miss you most of all, but not because I need you to take care of things. I miss my mom. The person I didn't bother to get to know because I was too busy using you. If you ever want to talk, I'm here. If you never want to talk to me again, I understand. Your daughter, Rebecca. I read the email 3 times. Then I closed my laptop and went for a walk along the beach in Queenstown, trying to process my feelings. Part of me was angry that it had taken a year for Rebecca to apologize. Part of me was skeptical about whether she really understood what she'd done, or if she was just saying what she thought I wanted to hear. But another part of me, the part that had spent 47 years loving my daughter despite everything, was glad that she'd reached out. Glad that maybe someday we could rebuild a relationship based on mutual respect rather than obligation. I didn't respond to the email right away. I needed time to think. I spent 2 months in New Zealand, hiking through mountains and fjords, exploring the Maori culture, writing my book in coffee shops and on beaches. The publisher wanted it finished by summer, and I was determined to meet that deadline. From New Zealand, I went to Australia. I spent time in Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. I visited the Great Barrier Reef and snorkeled among fish and coral that looked like they belonged in a fantasy world. I explored the outback and learned about Aboriginal culture from guides who shared their stories with patience and pride. In Sydney, I finally responded to Rebecca's email. Dear Rebecca, thank you for your apology. I appreciate that you've been in therapy and working on understanding what happened between us. I want you to know that I don't hate you. I was hurt, deeply hurt, by what you said and how you treated me for so many years. But you're my daughter and I love you. That said, I'm not ready to come home yet. I'm in the middle of writing a book about my travels, and I still have places I want to see. More importantly, I'm still figuring out who I am when I'm not being everyone's support system. I would like to rebuild our relationship, but it needs to be different this time. I can't go back to being invisible. I can't go back to sacrificing everything for everyone else. I need to be seen and respected as my own person, with my own needs and dreams. If you can accept that, then yes, we can work toward having a relationship again. If you can't, then I wish you well, but I need to prioritize my own well-being. I'm glad you're in therapy. I think it's helping. Keep working on yourself and I'll keep working on myself and maybe we can meet in the middle someday. Love, Mom. Her response came within hours. I understand. I don't like it, but I understand. Take all the time you need. I'll be here when and if you're ready. I love you, Mom. I'm proud of what you're doing. I should have said that a long time ago. Rebecca, I'm proud of what you're doing. 7 words I waited my entire life to hear. I finished my book in Bali, sitting on a terrace overlooking rice paddies that looked like green staircases climbing the hillside. I'd been traveling for 18 months, and I'd covered Asia, Europe, Africa, and Oceania. I'd learned to navigate foreign languages and currencies, to adapt to different customs, to find joy in unexpected places. I'd learned that I was capable of far more than I'd ever given myself credit for. My publisher loved the book. They wanted to release it in 6 months with a book tour to follow. A book tour. Me speaking to audiences about my life and my journey. The thought terrified and thrilled me in equal measure. I decided to spend the next few months in South America, before heading back to North America for the book release. I visited Peru and hiked to Machu Picchu, pushing my 74-year-old body to its limits and feeling triumphant when I reached the top. I went to Argentina and took tango lessons, learning to move my body in ways I never had before. I went to Chile and visited the Atacama Desert, the driest place on Earth, and stood under stars so bright and numerous they looked like someone had spilled diamonds across the sky. In Buenos Aires, I met a man named Carlos. He was 76, a retired literature professor who was traveling South America on his own. We met at a cafe, started talking, and didn't stop for 6 hours. We spent the next month traveling together just as friends. We visited wineries in Mendoza, explored Patagonia, laughed over shared meals and shared stories. Have you ever thought about settling down somewhere? He asked one evening over dinner in Santiago. I've thought about it, I admitted. But I'm not ready yet. There's still so much I want to see. What about after you've seen it all? I don't think you can see it all, I said. The world is too big, too full of wonder. But eventually, yes, I think I'll settle somewhere. I just don't know where yet. When you figure it out, let me know, Carlos said with a smile. I might join you. We parted ways in Rio de Janeiro, exchanging email addresses and a promise to keep in touch. He was going back to Spain to visit his children. I was heading to Central America before eventually making my way back to the United States for my book tour. My book, Never Too Late. One Woman's Journey to Find Herself at 72, was released 2 years and 3 months after I'd left Rebecca's house. The publisher arranged a book tour that would take me to 20 cities across the United States over 3 months. One of those cities was San Francisco. I hadn't seen Rebecca, Derek, or the twins in over 2 years. We'd exchanged emails occasionally, slow and careful communications where we were both trying to figure out how to be family to each other in a new way. Rebecca had continued therapy and had started setting better boundaries at work, spending more time with Madison and Mason. Madison had gotten the lead in her school musical and was now thinking about studying theater in college. Mason had become a nationally ranked soccer player and was being recruited by universities. They were growing up, becoming their own people. And I'd missed it. That hurt, but it was a hurt I'd chosen. I'd chosen myself, and that choice had consequences. Rebecca asked if she could come to my book reading in San Francisco. I said yes. The bookstore was packed. The publisher was thrilled. I was nervous, scanning the crowd for familiar faces. Then I saw her. Rebecca, sitting in the 3rd row, looking older than I remembered. Next to her were Derek, Madison, and Mason. Madison had grown at least 3 inches and had dyed her hair purple. Mason was taller than Derek now, all lanky teenage limbs. Our eyes met. Rebecca smiled tentatively. I smiled back. I read from my book, the section about that conversation in the kitchen when Rebecca called me a burden. My voice shook a little, but I got through it. When I finished, the audience applauded, and I saw Rebecca wipe tears from her eyes. During the Q&A, someone asked, "Have you reconciled with your daughter?" I looked at Rebecca. We're working on it, I said. Healing takes time. But yes, we're working on it. After the reading, after I'd signed books and talked to readers and heard dozens of stories about people's own journeys to finding themselves, my family approached. Madison got to me first, throwing her arms around me in a fierce hug. Grandma, I've missed you so much. I held her tight, breathing in her strawberry shampoo scent. I've missed you too, sweetheart. Mason hugged me next, mumbling, It's good to see you, Grandma. Derek shook my hand awkwardly and said, Eleanor, you look well. Congratulations on the book. Then Rebecca and I were face to face. Hi, Mom, she said softly. Hi, Rebecca. We stood there for a moment, 2 years of complicated feelings hanging between us. Then Rebecca said, I'm so proud of you. The book is beautiful. Your journey is beautiful. You're beautiful. I started crying. Rebecca started crying. And then we were hugging, really hugging, for the first time, and I couldn't remember how long. I'm sorry, Rebecca whispered. I'm so sorry for everything. I know, I said. I forgive you. But things can't go back to the way they were. I don't want them to, Rebecca said, pulling back to look at me. I want to know you, the real you. Not the version of you who sacrificed everything to make my life easier. I want to know Eleanor Hayes, world traveler, blogger, author, artist. I want my kids to know that person too. We went to dinner that night, all 5 of us. It was awkward at first, but gradually we found our rhythm. Madison told me about the musical and about the girl she developed a crush on. Mason talked about soccer and his college visits. Derek asked intelligent questions about my travels, actually listening to the answers. And Rebecca and I talked like 2 adults who respected each other. Not like a dutiful daughter barely tolerating her burdensome mother. It wasn't perfect. There were moments of tension, reminders of old hurts that still needed time to heal. But it was real. It was authentic. It was a beginning. Over dinner, I told them about my travels. Not the edited highlights from my blog, but the real experiences. The times I was lonely. The moments I doubted myself. The night in Bangkok when I cried in my hotel room because I missed them so much I could barely breathe. Why didn't you come home? Madison asked, her eyes wide. Because I needed to finish something I'd started, I said. Because sometimes love means staying away, so the other person can figure out who they really are without you doing it for them. Rebecca reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I understand that better now, she said. Since you left, I've had to figure out so many things for myself. How to be a better mother. How to be a better daughter. How to apologize when I'm wrong. And, I asked. And it's been hard, Rebecca admitted. But I'm better for it. So thank you for that, even though I hated you at the time. I laughed, the first real laugh I'd had in a conversation with Rebecca in years. You're welcome, I think. The next morning, Rebecca asked if I'd consider staying for a few weeks. The kids are on Thanksgiving break. We could spend time together. Properly this time. I should have said no. I had booked tour stops lined up in other cities. I had plans to visit Carlos in Spain before winter. I had a life that had nothing to do with this family that had made me invisible for so long. But I said yes. I stayed for 4 weeks. We went to the beach. We cooked together, with Rebecca actually following my lead in the kitchen instead of criticizing. We had family dinners where we actually paid attention to each other. Madison showed me her talent, singing arias from her school musical with a voice that made my heart ache with pride. Mason talked about soccer with an enthusiasm that was contagious. Derek, surprisingly, turned out to be more interesting than I'd given him credit for. We had a long conversation about architecture one afternoon. It turned out he'd studied design before going into venture capital, and he apologized for all the years he'd dismissed me. I was afraid of you, he said. I think I resented that Rebecca needed you so much, and I took that out on you by ignoring you. That was unfair. It was the first time Derek had ever acknowledged me as a real person, and I appreciated it more than I could express. The hardest conversation was with Rebecca. One evening when Derek had taken the kids to see a movie. We sat on her patio with wine and a view of the San Francisco Bay at sunset, and Rebecca asked the question I'd been waiting for her to ask. Do you still love me, Mom? After everything? I didn't hesitate. Of course I do. You're my daughter. But do you like me? Rebecca pressed. If I wasn't your daughter, if we met randomly, Would you want to be friends with me? It was a hard question to answer honestly. The truth was the person Rebecca had been, arrogant, dismissive, selfish, wasn't someone I would have chosen to spend time with. But that wasn't who Rebecca was anymore. I'm learning to, I said. The person you're becoming, yes. I would absolutely be friends with that person. And who was I before? Rebecca asked quietly. Someone who was so busy chasing success and validation that she forgot to see the people around her, I said gently. Someone who confused sacrifice with love. Someone who had been sacrificed for and didn't know how to handle gratitude, so she pretended it was obligation. Rebecca nodded, tears running down her face. That sounds right. That sounds like who I was. But you're not her anymore, I said. You're becoming someone who's thoughtful and self-aware and trying to do better. That person I like very much. We didn't hug, didn't suddenly become best friends. But we started something that night that I think could eventually become a real relationship between two adults who had history but were choosing to move forward anyway. After 4 weeks, I left again. I had a book tour to finish, cities waiting for me. Readers who were sharing their own stories of finding themselves later in life. At the airport, Rebecca and I stood in one of those awkward goodbye moments. Madison and Mason were at school. Derek was at work. It was just the two of us. I'm proud of you, Rebecca said. I know I should have said that years ago, but I'm saying it now. I'm proud of who you've become. Thank you, I said. I'm proud of me too. And I meant it. The book tour took me to 40 cities over 6 months. Everywhere I went, people came with stories. A woman from Ohio who'd left a husband who'd made her feel invisible. A man from Texas who'd reinvented himself after retirement instead of fading away. A group of women from Boston who'd bonded over their shared experience of being taken for granted by their families. I was giving voice to something so many people had felt but never articulated. I was showing them that it was possible to walk away, to choose yourself, to build a life that was meaningful and full and entirely your own. My blog had 500,000 followers now. Publishers wanted more books. Speaking agencies called asking if I'd do corporate events or TED Talks. Suddenly, at 75 years old, I was becoming someone. Not someone's devoted mother. Not someone's helpful grandmother. Not someone's support system. Just Eleanor. After the book tour ended, I made a decision. I wasn't going back to San Francisco. I wasn't going back to being anyone's caretaker. Instead, I bought a small property in Portugal. A little village near the coast where I'd fallen in love during my travels. Carlos helped me find it. A stone cottage with a garden and a view of the Atlantic Ocean. I moved in at the beginning of autumn, and I started a new chapter. I set up a small studio in one of the bedrooms and went back to pursuing architecture, something I'd abandoned 47 years earlier. I took online classes. I studied. I sketched. I wasn't going to become an architect at 75, but I could finally pursue the passion that had defined my younger self. Carlos visited regularly. We took walks on the beach. We read books together. We had long conversations about life and love, and what it meant to be alive after you'd spent so many years just surviving. He asked me to marry him one evening over dinner, and I said no. Why? He asked, smiling because he knew what was coming. Because I don't need to marry anyone, I said. I'm happy with you. I love spending time with you. But I don't need to bind myself to someone to be complete. I'm complete on my own. He laughed and said, fair enough. But I had to try. Rebecca and I maintained our relationship through emails and video calls. She visited me twice a year in Portugal. Madison and Mason came once for a month during their summer break. And I watched them discover the world the way I was discovering it, with wonder and without fear. Madison decided to study theater in college and came to stay with me during a semester abroad. We traveled through Europe together, just the two of us, and I watched her transform from my granddaughter into a young woman finding her own way. When she asked me why I'd left, I told her the truth. Because I realized that staying would have meant both of us spending our lives waiting for each other instead of building our own. You needed space to become who you were meant to be, and I needed to finally discover who I was outside of everyone else's needs. Do you regret it? Madison asked. Regret what? I asked. Leaving? No. Missing things in your and Mason's lives? Yes. But regret the decision itself? Never. My second book, Finding Eleanor. The Art of Creating a Life That's Yours, was published when I was 78. It was more reflective than the first, dealing with how to maintain your own identity within family relationships, how to set healthy boundaries, how to love people without sacrificing yourself. It became a bestseller. People would stop me on the street in Lisbon or Porto and tell me that my books had changed their lives, that I'd given them permission to leave, to say no, to prioritize their own well-being, that my story had made them brave. It was intoxicating and overwhelming and sometimes terrifying. What if I'd inspired someone to make a choice they ended up regretting? What if my story became a template for abandoning family responsibilities? I thought about this a lot, and I came to the conclusion that I'd done what I needed to do to survive. Rebecca and her family would have been fine without me. In fact, they were probably better off. But if I had stayed, I would have slowly disappeared, faded into invisibility until there was nothing left of Eleanor but the echo of her sacrifices. I couldn't let that happen. And maybe my story gave permission to others who needed to make similar choices. At 80 years old, I sat in my garden in Portugal with a view of the ocean and thought about my life. 72 years I'd spent being what everyone else needed. 8 years I'd spent being myself. It hadn't been an easy 8 years. There had been loneliness, fear, uncertainty, and moments when I questioned my choices. But there had also been joy. There had been growth. There had been the overwhelming, profound experience of finally being alive in a way I'd never been before. Rebecca came to visit on my 80th birthday. She brought Derek and the kids. Madison had just graduated from college. Mason was about to start his first job as a software engineer. Derek had stepped back from his company to spend more time on art and design. Rebecca had reduced her hours at work and was finally, she said, figuring out what she actually wanted from life instead of just chasing the next achievement. We sat in my garden and Rebecca said, "I need to tell you something." "Okay," I said, bracing myself. "I'm in therapy again. Different therapist. Not because there's anything wrong, but because I want to make sure I don't pass on to Madison and Mason the same patterns I had. The same learned behavior of using people and not valuing their contributions." "That's good," I said. "And I wanted to apologize again," Rebecca continued. "Not because I haven't already, but because I think I owed you a deeper apology. I didn't just fail to appreciate you. I actively made you feel worthless. I took everything you gave and I turned it into an obligation, something you owed me for the roof over your head." "I know," I said gently. "I wasted so many years not knowing you," Rebecca said. "I could have had a real relationship with my mother instead of a transactional one. And the worst part is that you had to hurt yourself to make me realize that. You had to leave everything behind for me to finally see you." "I know," I said again. "But you're seeing me now. That's what matters." Madison hugged me from behind where I was sitting, and I felt tears on her cheek. "Thank you for showing us that it's okay to choose yourself," she said. "Thank you for being brave enough to leave, so I could be brave enough to figure out who I am." Later that night, after the kids had gone to bed and Derek was reading in the living room, Rebecca and I walked on the beach. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. "I've been thinking about something," Rebecca said. "What if I'd asked you to stay? If I'd apologized right after that conversation instead of a year later? If I'd begged you not to leave, would you have stayed?" I thought about it honestly. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe I would have. And maybe that would have been a mistake that we both would have regretted." "So you needed to leave," Rebecca said. "I needed to prove that I could survive without you," I said. "I needed to know that my worth wasn't dependent on what I could do for other people. I needed to become myself." "And have you?" Rebecca asked. "Become yourself?" I looked out at the ocean, at the beauty of it, at the vast expanse of water stretching to infinity. I thought about the woman I'd been at 25, full of dreams and possibilities. I thought about the woman I'd been at 72, invisible and resigned. I thought about the woman I was now, at 80, finally becoming integrated with all her different selves. "I think so," I said. "Not fully, maybe. I'm still learning. Still growing. But yes, I'm becoming myself. Finally." Rebecca took my hand, and we walked together along the beach in comfortable silence. My life didn't end up like a fairy tale. I didn't become a famous architect or a legendary artist. I didn't find perfect love with Carlos or rediscover some hidden destiny that had been waiting for me all along. What I found was something simpler and more profound. I found that my life was mine to live. Not my daughter's life. Not my grandchildren's life. Not a supporting role in someone else's story. My life belonged to me. And I learned that it's never too late to claim that truth. Whether you're 35 or 55 or 75 or 85, you have the right to decide what kind of life you want to live and who you want to be. You don't need permission from your family. You don't need approval from society. You don't need to wait until you're old and tired and feeling invisible before you stand up and say, "This is my life, and I get to decide what to do with it." The hardest part isn't leaving. The hardest part is learning that it was always your right to leave, and that you wasted so many years not knowing that simple truth. Rebecca came to stay with me for a month every summer after that. Madison and Mason visited when they could. Derek learned to enjoy spending time with me, once I wasn't the person he'd relegated to the background. Even Michael, who'd always been supportive from a distance, started visiting regularly. I wasn't trying to rebuild the family I'd left. I was building something new, something healthier and more authentic. A family based not on obligation but on choice. On seeing each other as real people with our own needs and dreams instead of as roles to be played. My third book was just published last month. The Price of Sacrifice. Why Mothers Need to Matter Too. Addresses the patterns of maternal martyrdom that keep so many women invisible throughout their lives. It's already becoming a bestseller, and I've received thousands of emails from readers thanking me for putting words to their pain. I've also started mentoring younger women through an organization dedicated to helping women plan for lives after caregiving. I teach them about financial independence, about travel, about the importance of maintaining their own interests and friendships while raising families. I tell them my story. I tell them about Rebecca and how I wasted decades being invisible in my own family. And I tell them that it doesn't have to be that way. That they don't have to wait until 72 to start living for themselves. That they can maintain their relationships while also maintaining their dignity and their sense of self. But what if I feel guilty? They ask. Good, I say. Guilt means you still care. But ask yourself, who benefits from your guilt? Does it make your family love you more? Or does it just make you smaller, quieter, less visible? Some of them listen. Some of them don't. But at least I'm giving them the option, the information, the knowledge that there's another way. At 82, I've traveled to 53 countries. I speak 4 languages conversationally and 5 more at a basic level. I've published 3 books. I've given hundreds of talks. I've created a body of work that will outlast me, that will help other women find their voices and claim their lives. Rebecca called me last week to tell me about a big promotion she turned down because she didn't want to work the hours required. She took a lateral move instead. Something that paid less but gave her more time with her family. She said she was thinking about what I'd taught her, that having a successful career isn't worth it if you lose yourself in the process. I'm trying to make sure Madison and Mason see that they matter more than any job, she said. That I matter. That I don't disappear just because I'm a mother and a wife. I was so proud I could barely speak. She also said, I read something in an interview you gave. You said that the worst thing a parent can do is become invisible. That children need to see their parents as full human beings with their own lives and dreams. That resonated with me. Good, I said. But Mom, Rebecca continued, you also had to disappear to make me see that. To make me understand. I just wanted to acknowledge that and say I'm sorry it took you leaving for me to learn the lesson. I know, I said. I've made peace with that. And I have. I'm living in my cottage in Portugal with my garden and my view of the ocean. I have friends all over the world from my travels. I have a community of readers who are inspired by my work. I have a family that respects me and wants to spend time with me. Not because I take care of them, but because they actually like me. Is my relationship with Rebecca perfect now? No. We still have moments of tension. Times when old patterns try to reassert themselves. But we've built something real out of the ashes of what we had before, and that's worth more than perfect could ever be. And the greatest gift? My grandchildren are growing up knowing their grandmother as a real person. Madison and Mason see that I have passions and interests, and a life that exists outside of serving them. They see that it's possible to love your family, while also loving yourself. They see that you don't have to choose between the two. If I could go back and talk to that 72-year-old woman sitting in Rebecca's kitchen, hearing her daughter call her a burden, I would say just one thing. This is your moment. This is the moment that changes everything. And yes, it's going to be hard and scary and you're going to doubt yourself. But on the other side of this pain is a life that's actually yours. And it's worth it. You're worth it. I was worth it. I was always worth it. I just had to travel to the other side of the world to believe it. And now every day, I wake up in my cottage in Portugal with a view of the Atlantic Ocean, and I know that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Doing exactly what I'm supposed to be doing. Being exactly who I'm supposed to be. I'm Eleanor Hayes. I'm 82 years old. I'm an author, a mentor, a traveler, a friend, a grandmother, a daughter, a woman who matters. And I finally believe it.